Good evening. Welcome in RNQ Isino classes. Block number 2, unit number 4, Justifications Modern Approach. Objectives. Often today, world gets defined as knowledge world. But what knowledge itself is something that demands priority over the various types of knowledge that we value today. Knowledge, when gets analyzed, carries justification as one of its prime conditions. This unit aims to define justifications and segregate epistemic justification from other varieties of justification. Then we shall explore the relation between justifications and truth. Different theories of justifications are propounded on the basis of the conception how an impartial justification chain gets terminated. The major theories of justifications, namely foundationalism, coherentism, contextualism, and reliabilism, will be analyzed separately. Towards the end of brief sketch of the well-known controversy between internalism and externalism will be detailed. 4.1 Introduction. Analysis of knowledge concentrates out that category of knowledge which philosophers sometimes call factual knowledge. This is roughly knowledge that such and such is the case. In the context of knowledge how to do something or knowing a person, this information sense of knowledge from the time of Plato has been accomplished by its subjective requirement, namely brief, and objective requirement, namely truth. However, Plato himself conceded that it is not enough for one's belief feeds and truth. This belief must not be true by chance. The person acquiring it must use some reliable method appropriate for acquiring such a belief. This is called justifications. In fact, justifications of belief is said to constitute the subject matter of epistemology. Why is justification considered as the central them in knowledge analysis? Does it carry more weightage than the other two conditions of knowledge, namely truth and belief? This unit intends to address these questions in detail. Of late, epistemologists have realized that the major pitfall in the historical form of standard analysis, namely the JTB analysis, is that we have not adequately explicated the connection between justification and truth. In any case, as Chisholm says, at present our understanding of what is it for a proposition to be justified is very much similar to what is it to be moral or well mannered. This vagueness has caused an eventful era in the history of epistemology known as Jeter era. This begins in 1963 when Edmund L. Jeter has published a two-page article titled "Is Justified True Belief Knowledge?" Herein Jeter advocates two counter examples to the existing form of standard analysis. A Jeter counter example is one in which a person has a justified but false belief by inference, from which he justifiably believes something which happens to be true. As a result, he arrives at a justifiably true belief which is not knowledge. The greater aftermath has prompted philosophers to revise knowledge analysis, and the critical revisions were effected in justifications conditions. The traditional internationalistic conception of justifications has been unified identified fallible, and this made them think of an externalistic alternative to justifications. In fact, the externalistic tendency in epistemic justifications should be read together with other contemporary trends like naturalism in epistemology. It is our experience that we have at our disposal certain beliefs which are in instances of justified belief and few others which are unjustified ones. Will the layman and neither consequence nor capable to discern the creation criterion of their distinction of the epistemologist takes upon himself this task of electing their criterion what could be the necessary and sufficient conditions of belief being justified. Different answers lie at the root of the different theories of justification. The exact significance of the concept of justification is this, that is evaluates the cognitive agent to have immediate accessibility to truth which otherwise is external to him. In order to understand the notion of justification, there are two questions we need to ask. First, what is the strength of justification needed for knowledge, and second, what is the underlying nature of justification itself. Before addressing these questions, it is essential that we discern that variety of justification called epistemic justification. 4.2, the spices of justifications called epistemic justification. It is evident that knowledge is not simply through belief and epistemic acceptance. Belief which happens to be true does not suffice for knowledge. A groundless conjecture, say a superstitious man walking inadvertently under a ladder might believe that he was about to suffer some misfortune, and it may turn out to be true as well, but still we would not credit knowledge to him, for here he arrived at his conviction by a process of reasoning which are unreliable. This necessitates that true belief qualifying as knowledge must be based on good evidence. The conditions may be formulated thus: if A is known that P, then S is completely justified in accepting that P. The italicized term "completely" in the locution requires a further explanations. The reason of necessitating that a person be completely justified rather than simply justified is to indicate that slight justification is not enough. As we know, there are many specific varieties of justifications in use in our daily life. Therefore, it is imperative that we distinguish epistemic justification as the species of justifications which is appropriate to belief or judgments rather than to actions, decisions, and so on. But these classifications would not take us a long way, since there are other species of justifications which also can apply to beliefs. Epistemic justification in our sense is disinterested justifications. For the epistemic justifications or a belief does not depend on persons desiring that belief to be true. It is clear that a belief brings in one's best prudential interest is never a sufficient condition. for that beliefs being epistemically justified. Therefore, epistemic justification may be distinguished from prudential justification. Epistemic justification may also be distinguished, citing differences between doxastic and pro, mm, propositional justifications. The former doxastic variety of justification amounts to a person's being justified in believing some propositions, and the latter propositional is suggestive of some propositions being justified for a person. It is obvious that the doxastic justification is that which is essential for epistemic justifications, for otherwise the propositions could be justified for a S even if S were not justified in believing it. Within epistemic justification, we should also distinguish between one's being justified in believing that P and one's justifying belief that P. The former is justifications before the event and the latter justifications after it, where one is doing something to show that P to exhibit that one's belief is justified. Epistemic justifications currently under consideration runs into terms of the former, since that alone is the type of justifications which speaks of a state or a conditions one is in, not anything one does or any offshoot thereof. Roderick M. Chisholm, Chisholm, Chisholm remarks that the term justify in its applications to a belief is used as a term of epistemic appraisal. The term epistemic appraisal is suggestive of two things. One, the term justify is a term of appraisal, and hence it, like the concept of validity or rightness, and unlike the concept of sweetness or softness, is an evaluative concept. 2. The evaluation is epistemic in nature and hence to be distinguished from other kinds of evaluation like moral, legal, religious, or prudential. The evaluation is done here from the epistemic viewpoint. The epistemic viewpoint may be defined by the aim at maximizing truth and minimizing falsity in a large body of beliefs. In fact, what distinguishes epistemic justifications from other kinds of justifications is its special relation to truth. The epistemic subject out to keep before himself the goals of believing the true and not believing the false. The above discussion speaks of distinctive features of epistemic justification. However, it is not clear as to what it is for a belief to be justified. Generally, a person is said to be justified in believing that P if the belief is based on adequate grounds. What it is for a subject to have adequate grounds, as W.P. Alston observes, it is to say that a present belief could be inferentially drawn from the other beliefs or experience which are strongly indicative of the truth of the belief. Let us explore further the so-called adequate grounds or evidences and their relations to justification. 4.3 Justifications and evidence. Philosophers commonly think of epistemic justifications as evidence or warrant for propositions. However, there is a disagreement over what exactly qualifies as justifying evidence. All evidences for a belief may not be justifying. Evidence is justifying if it consists of good and relevant reasons. Keith Leher suggests that evidence represents the conviction of a man concerning the chances of truth of a sentence in the light of his experience, reason, and testimony of others, and therefore is entirely subjective. Following later, we may stipulate the rule for the selections of evidence, thus accept sentences as evidence if it has a higher subjective probability than any sentences with which it competes for the status of evidence. In order to work out this method of choosing evidence, we must first of all specify with which empirical sentences are given. A given sentences must complete whether a sentence is to be accepted as evidence invariably invariably arises in comes context and with regarded to some hypothesis. Let us call it touchstone hypothesis. The sentences that compete for the status of for evidence are the ones that are relevant to the touchstone hypothesis. A sentences S is relevant to a hypothesis H if the probability of HPH is either less than the probability of H on SPHS, in which case S is favorably relevant to H, or PH is greater than PHS, in which case S is unfavorably relevant to H. Assuming that the class of sentences thus chosen is a finite one, we may place them in numerical order S1, S2, Sn. Further, we may attempt to reduce the members of this class by constructing maximal conjunction containing every S or its negations, but not both. Such a net of propositions may be called the conception set for H. With this, we shall formulate the conditions for the acceptance a sentence as evidence. Accept E as evidence relevant to H if E is member of the competition set C for H and PE is greater than PS for any S in C with which E competes. This clearly points out that the prime role of justifications is to connect knowledge with the truth. Therefore, let us address the relations between justifications and truth. 4.4 Truth and Justifications. One can speak of a twofold relation between epistemic justifications and truth in a trivial sense. To say that one is justified in believing a given proposition is the something as to say that one is justified in believing that the proposition is true. Secondly, in the non-trivial sense, if I want to believe what is true and disbelieve what is false, then the most reasonable thing for me to do is it believe what is rationally justified and not to believe what is not justified. To say differently, one should accept those propositions alone which have good reasons to support to accept a belief. In the absence of such reasons is held to a extremely blameworthy because it neglects the epistemic pursuit of truth. Edmund L. Gettier will challenging the JTB definitions of knowledge makes it clear that there are two prepositions involved in these counter examples. First one is that a false belief can be justified. This has in fact questioned the close relation between epistemic justifications and truth. Well, one could view these two as conceptually distinct components of knowledge. A variety of philosophers from Descartes to the present have have presupposed the view that justifications and truth are conceptually related. It is conceived that there is an internal connection between a belief being justified and being true. The strongest view regarding truth connection is affirming that the connection is logical that it to say that if conditions E justify a belief for a person, then those conditions logically entitled that the belief is true. This Cartesian view has been discarded by contemporary philosophers who have instead adopted a fallibilistic theory of justifications. A fallibilistic theory allows that when E make P justified for S, it is still possible that P is false. The conditions under which we are justified in believing P in the request sense failed to guarantee the truth of P. Why fallibilism in epistemic justification? Let us explore further. From the cognitive agent's viewpoint, there seems to be no difference between ascertaining that somebody is justified in believing that it is true that P and it is true that P that is to say, in order to ascertain that the truth condition is satisfied, there is nothing one has to do or can do in addition to ascertaining that the justification conditions is satisfied. That is why some philosophers at least consider truth conditions as redundant in knowledge analysis. Knowing truth, there is nothing that the knower can do except having a fully justified belief in what he supposes to be true. In fact, no subject can supply the truth conditions. It has to be satisfied only by the propositions or by the object about which the subject wants to assert. All that the knowing subject can do is to go on collecting maximum evidence to strengthen his justification in favor of the truth of the propositions in questions. But the truth of the propositions does not lie within the justifications of the believer. If a belief is true, it is true not because the believer has made it true, but because it corresponds to fact. Hence it is observed that the satisfaction justifications conditions, however complete it may appear, does not entail satisfactions of the truth conditions. In brief, truth and justifications are two conceptually independent concepts. Granting this, we may better settle down with a fallibilist theory of justification, which would permit us to claim at least a few cases of knowledge where we are fortunate enough to hit at the truth. It is hoped that if our standards of epistemic justifications are appropriately chosen, bringing it about that our beliefs are epistemically justified will also tend to bring it about that they are true. The only obvious way to show that an empirical belief P is justified is by producing an argument to the effect that it is shown as justified by citing some other empirical belief P and pointing out the P in some acceptable way can infer it from Q in an interferal justification. It is not necessary that the person explicitly reaches the justifying argument in questions to others or to himself. That would be a luxury one in indulges in only in special situations. All that is required is this inferential route, but route be available to the agent, so that in case that belief is called in no is into question, she should be able to make it explicit. A little reflection should reveal that one has a clearly stipulate theories regarding how she wishes to terminate this inferential justifications chain. Depending on how one wishes to terminate this inferential justifications chain, philosophers have conceived different theories of justifications. What follows is a brief enumerations of major theories of justifications. 4. Theories of justifications. Foundationalism. This is the oldest of all theories according to which interferal justification chain terminates with belief that are immediately justified beliefs that do not depend on any other beliefs for their justifications. It is claimed here that if we try uh, so critically to formulate any claim to no be will come to a stopping place where the fact that P is the sole reason for my justifiably believing that P. Chisolm called these a stopping place as directly evident propositions. In brief, foundationalists distinguish two kinds of justified beliefs. Some beliefs that are justified independently of their relationships to other beliefs, and some other beliefs that are justified because of their relationship to other beliefs. The first sort of belief is called foundational and second sort is called non-foundational. The central thesis or foundationalism thus can be presented in the following arguments. A. Some empirical beliefs possess a measure of epistemic justifications which is somehow immediate or interesting to them and do not depend inferentially or otherwise on the epistemic justifications of other empirical beliefs. And B. The basis beliefs and foundational beliefs are the ultimate source of justifications for all empirical knowledge. All other empirical beliefs derive beliefs derive their justifications from standing in appropriate inferential evidential relation to the members of this epistemically privileged class. To borrow the Leibnizian terminology, the self-mode movers of the epistemic realm contribute the foundations upon which empirical knowledge rests. Now, what are the conditions for a belief to be basic? For a belief to be basic, it must meet two conditions. It must be self-justified and must not be justified by any non-basic belief. It must be either irrefutable, or if refutable, must only be refutable by other basic beliefs. The above picture of foundationalism suggests that the structure of justified thought is like a building. The foundations of the building rest on the strong basic foundational belief which is irrefutable. Ideally, they are self-justified. The higher levels of the building consisting of mediate beliefs which get justified because of their relationships to other beliefs. The analogy is perfect. Just as the super parts of the building rest on its foundation, so too the non-basic beliefs rest on the basic beliefs. Typically, foundationalists claim that belief about our perpetual states are self-evident and infallible. This is objected. Many philosophers point out that perpetual belief can't be included in the list of infallible propositions. On the other hand, if we have any indubitable beliefs, they are so few in number that they could not provide a foundations for the rest of what we obviously know. Apart from this, there is also the problem about the way non-foundationalist beliefs are said to rest on foundational beliefs. The foundationalist has two options. One might require foundational beliefs logically to imply non-foundational beliefs, or none might relax this requirement, as we shall see. Neither option seems to work. If the foundationalist requires foundational beliefs logically to implement non-foundational beliefs, then most beliefs turn out to be unjustified. The foundationalist then must beliefs turn out to be unjustified. The foundationalists then must claim that the foundational beliefs need to logically imply non non-foundational beliefs. This means that foundational beliefs can be non-logical evidence for non-foundationalist beliefs, but non-logical evidence is called as non-defensible evidence. If E is a non-logical evidence for some proposition C, then it will be possible to debate E as support for C by adding new information. With this, foundationalism is in for trouble. If foundational belief is defeasible evidence for non-foundational beliefs, then it fail its very definitions. As we known, one of the conditions of foundationalism is that the foundationalist beliefs must not be defeated by other things one belief subsequently. We realize that foundationalism depend on the global conditions, that no defects be present for these foundational beliefs. The conclude it is not clear that we have indubitable beliefs, and even if we admit foundational beliefs that are realized as those which are defeasible, that this suggests that our propositions gets justified because of the way our evidence globally fit together. This is suggestive of coherent theory of justification on the coherentist solutions to the regress problem. That need to be any basic beliefs, because all beliefs may be justified by their relations to others by mutual support. The edifice of justification stands because of the way in which the parts fit together and delicately support each other. Coherentists also deny the claim that the justification need proceed until all claims to knowledge are themselves justified. Justifications of knowledge claims need proceed only as long as some claims to knowledge is disputed. There is a general distinction drawn between negative and positive epistemic correlatism. Negative correlatism asserts that a person justifiably believes a proposition so long as he does not have a reason to refrain from believing it. Positive correlatism assigns positive functions to reasons to produce positive support for justified beliefs. Keith Lehrer has suggested the following scheme for the positive coherence theory. A person is justified in believing a proposition P if P coheres with the other beliefs belonging to a system of beliefs kind K. Two immediate questions spring from into one. What kind of system is kind K, and in what way must a belief correlate with other beliefs belonging to a system of belief to be justified? To consider the second questions first, the traditional defenders of Coherenticism, namely idealists, have conceived coherence relations as a relation of necessary connections or entailment. This in requirement of classical coherenticism is untenable. Philosophers have come to an agreement that such a logical entailment is not necessary for complete justifications. The second issue address the problem: what kind of a belief system must a justified belief correlate with? There are, for example, certain science fictions that are obviously erroneous, and the coherence of a belief with system of that sort is not sufficient for justifications. In fact, the proponents of a coherence theory of justifications have not yet arrived at a uniform resolutions of this problem. Thus, the notion of maximal coherence is intolerably vague philosophers of the present have attempted to meet this requirement and have offered modified visions of coherence theory of justification. Contextualism is yet another theory of justification. Contextualists maintain that in the context of an inquiry of discussion that the truth or acceptability of some propositions will be taken for granted by the discussions. These propositions through themselves are unjustified can be used to provide inferential justifications for other propositions. Contextualists seem to be holding that the foundations of justifications are those beliefs that a certain community of beliefs takes for granted or accepts without any reasons, but they do not specify who the relevant fellow believers are and what is the minimum number of believers required for a belief to be justified. This apart assess awareness of the consensus of his fellow believers is left out totally above all the social consensus. Consen- Consensus can't provide the required reason to believe anything to be true. Social consensus will empower one to say only what is believed by certain people, but being believed can't be a good reason for being qualified as true. Further, the concept of a social consensus is laden with vaguenesses. Nothing is specified about whose consensus in epistemically significant and what kind of con consensus constitutes epistemic consensus. Last but not the last, being pre, uh, preoccupied with the social consensus. Contextualist has ignored the individual's epistemic perspective, which has a priority over other social consensus. 4.6 Internalism was externalism. Of late, philosophers have noted that the regress problem has two versions. One version deals with people's abilities to be justified in holiday beliefs, questions about the nature and extent of believers' awarenesses of their justifications are not directly relevant to this. Visions of the problem. The second visions on the other address people in abilities to identify their justification responsive to the issues of being justified and being able to identify justifications are respectively called externalism and internism as the levels indicate in internalist theories to try to account for a justified through appeal to internal features of his, and externalist theorists try to do the same through appeal to external features of his. Internalist positions will restrict justifies to items that are within the subject. Now the issue turns on what kind of access a thinker has to the future in question. In this literature of internalism, we find two senses in which the face is used, one being within the subject perspective, and two being accessible to the subject in some special way. The former is called perspectival internalism, and the latter access internalism. According to the both version of internalism, as the subject shift from one situation to another, so longer his beliefs and sensory information remain constant, the evidential status of his belief also will remain constant. Clearly, the truth of a state's belief that the truth of Ace's belief need not remain known after he has shifted to rigged circumstances. Thus, the justifications theories internalistically conceived can succeed become an epistemic situation that is not rigged, maybe doxastically similar to that of rigged. Externalism represents a substantial departure from its general tradition. Externalists claim that although there must indeed exist a reason why a basic empirical belief is likely to be true, the person for whom the belief is basic need not himself have the cognitive grasp of the reason. According to them, epistemic justifications of a basic belief derives from obtaining of an appropriate relations, causal or nomological, between the believer and the world. If truth is an epistemic goal, we may define justifications in terms of this goal. some relationship to the external world, accounting for the truth of our belief suffixes to suffix to convert true belief into knowledge without our having any idea of that relationship. It is not our conception of how we are related to a fact that aids knowledge, but simply our being so related to it. The most common reason of externalism is reliabilism. The idea is to ground justifications in the reliability of belief forming process to specify the conditional. SS belief in P is justified if SS belief P in P is produced by a reliable process. Reliabilism is a plausible alternative for the following reasons. Since truth is our epistemic goal, reliable belief forming mechanisms are the right means to this goal. Just like justifications, reliabilism also comes in degrees. The greater the availability of evidences, the better will be the justificatory status of our belief. In brief, the graded nature of justifications matches the graded nature reliability. 3. Rational, the reliable belief forming process do coincide. There is a close intuitive connections between epistemic justifications and reliability. Through reliabilism emerges as a plausible solutions to the problem faced. Intralism, some nagging questions like is reliabilism necessary for justifications? Is reliability sufficient for justifications, etc., reduces its color.